Good morning. Today is Tuesday, November 17th, 2020. There's a cliche that the most common problems in marriage relate to money, sex, and in-laws. It's certainly been my experience working with couples over many, many years that is an accurate list. And in my experience working with couples, I would give first place to money. Questions, problems over money, earning it, but much more importantly, spending it. The decision-making process is something that causes a lot of conflict for couples. And not only at the beginning of marriage, but in the middle and as it goes along. I think part of the reason is because there is great variation in how families manage and make decisions about money, but often it goes not verbalized, unverbalized. And therefore, the way you grow up, you just assume that's what all families do. But since it's not verbalized, it is very easy to come into a situation where now you're connected to another person who grew up in a different family and also has an understanding of monetary issues that they never even thought there might be a difference in other families about. Again, because it's not so well verbalized. Whatever the reason, it certainly is true. For that reason, our sages give us detailed advice for finances in marriage, and we ignore that advice at our own peril. It's very, very good advice. And a big part of the genius of the way our sages set this up is that there is flexibility. There exists a range of options in how a couple will manage their finances, from one extreme of joining everything and commingling everything to maintaining separate finances, separate accounts. And there is no right or wrong. Each couple has the right to decide which variation they want. And again, the Talmud, the Mishnah and the Talmud has very explicit guidance about how to set it up, how to balance those things. And also, it's extremely important to realize that that arrangement can change. During the life of a family, situation changes, jobs change, family dynamics change, and therefore the couple has got to be willing not only to come to an arrangement initially, but to be able to revisit it in a constructive way and alter the arrangement as it becomes appropriate during the life of that family. So there is a halakhic principle that underlies this entire subject, which finds itself expressed in our parsha in a very interesting way, and that's what I'd like to share with you this morning very briefly. So, our parsha, the parsha of Toldos, has as its central narrative this episode of the deception of Yitzchak to arrange that he should give the blessing to Yaakov, the younger son, instead of Esav, the older son. And the deception is initiated by and largely carried out by Rivka, Yaakov's mother, Yitzchak's wife, and Yaakov actually does the deception, but at the urging and with the advice of his mother. So, how did it actually work physically, logistically? So the Torah says as follows. Rivka says to Yaakov, I want you to do what I'm telling you. And the subtext is, I understand that it may not be clear why I'm asking you to do it this way. And I understand that this goes against your character to be deceitful, but I am telling you this is what you need to do. I'm taking responsibility for this plan. And she says as follows, Lech na el atzon, go to our flock of sheep, or goats actually, v'kach li misham, and take for me from there, from the flock, shnei gedi izim, 2 goats, and she's going to use the meat from the goats to serve to Yitzchak, so that Yaakov can pretend that he went hunting to prepare this meal for his father as Yitzchak had instructed Esav. And she's going to use the skin of the animal to cover Yaakov's arms so that it will more closely resemble the hairy arms of Esav. So when, in fact, Yitzchak says to his son, let me feel your arms, and he feels the arms, and it feels like the arms of Esav, but that's because Rivka had anticipated this and used these goat skins to make Yaakov's, I guess, more smooth or fair skin appear like Esav's. Okay. A curious word that does not appear to be necessary in the words that I read to you. Lech na el atzon, go to the flock, Rivka says to Yaakov, v'kach misham, and take from there 2 goats, and that's what I'm going to use for this deception. But that's not what the pasuk says. The pasuk has an extra word, v'kach li misham. Now, the simple translation of that extra word li would be, take for me 2 goats, meaning Rivka says to Yaakov, go to the flock and take 2 goats and bring them to me, and I will use them to help you create this deception. Okay, that's a simple way to read it. But another way to read it, which is picked up by the Midrash, is kach v'kach li misham, take mine from there. In other words, Rivka is telling Yaakov, take my goats. What does that mean? So Rashi points this out. Rashi quotes the Medrash, Mishalihem. Rivka is saying to Yaakov, make sure that you take the goats that belong to me, my goats. Meaning, don't take my husband's goats, Yitzchak's goats, they belong to him, but Yitzchak and Rivka had an arrangement in their marriage that a certain number of the goats belonged to Yitzchak, and a certain number of the goats belonged to Rivka, and they could each do with them as they pleased. So Rivka specified to her son Yaakov, make sure you take my goats, don't take his goats. Notwithstanding the fact that she's using them for a deception, but you see something amazing, she would not have used those goats if they did not belong to her. In other words, when something is owned jointly, it is necessary for a married couple to agree on the expenditure. And neither should make a major expenditure or major financial decision without the agreement of the other. And this is a halacha, a law in Jewish family law, that is derived from many sources, but one of them is this verse, because you see that Rivka would not have taken them if they would have been co-joined, co-owned, without informing Yitzchak. And of course she couldn't inform Yitzchak because the whole point is she was deceiving him. There's a custom in parts of the Jewish world at a Jewish wedding to execute a document called Tanayim. Tanayim means conditions. And it is a document that says that this couple is engaged to be married. They promise to marry each other. They promise to do certain things for each other in terms of how they will set up their household. And they certify that they have fulfilled all of their obligations to each other, and the marriage can take place in the right time. Originally, the custom was this was an engagement document. This would be done at the onset. When the couple got engaged, this would be a document that says we plan to marry each other and to set up our home in this way. In some communities, it became the custom to do it at the wedding right before the chuppah. Of course, you could ask yourself, well, if you're already at the wedding and the bride is in a wedding dress and the caterer is there and the chuppah is set up, why do you have to make an agreement to actually go ahead and get married? I mean, it's pretty clear that it's about to happen in a couple of minutes. So it is not a universal custom. It happens not to be my personal custom to do it, although I'm happy to do it when I officiate if couples want it. It has grown in popularity over the years. I think it's because this custom also comes with a photo op, because this is the moment in the ceremony where the two mothers break a plate. So the idea of breaking a plate is the two mothers are taking a piece of china, which if you break it and you try to glue it back together, you will always see the crack, to say that just as breaking the plate is permanent, it can never be fixed as if it was new, so too this agreement is permanent and will stand, and they will get married in a couple of minutes. Okay, personally, I think that a lot of people remember that photo op part of it. I've actually had several weddings where I've said to the couple, listen, if you don't want to actually do the document, but you want the photo op, so that's fine. Let the two mothers stand together and break a plate, and you take a photo and you have it. Okay. Even though it is not my custom to execute this document at a wedding, however, there is a line in it that is very, very important. And even when this couple is not executing this document, I always make it a point to say this to the couple, to teach them this lesson as a basis for a good marriage. And the line in the document is as follows: Va'al yavrichu, va'al yalimu, lo zeh mizo, v'lo zo mizeh, shum havrachas maman ba'olam. That the bride and the groom agree to each other that neither of them will hide any assets or make any major decisions about assets without the assent of the other. Eli yishlatu b'nechseim shava b'shava. Rather, they will make decisions about major financial issues in their marriage equally between the two of them. B'shalva, b'shalom v'shalva, with peace and with harmony. Kederach b'nei Torah v'yirei Hashem Yisbarach, in the way of those who follow the Torah and respect God, to make these decisions together in a peaceful manner. So that is really a bedrock of a good marriage practice. And even if you're not signing this particular document, that clause is something to keep in mind. And again, this passage in our parsha is one of the sources of how careful husbands and wives need to be. Many, many years ago, a man came to me and he said to me that he had bought a new home. So I said to them, oh, it's wonderful, mazel tov. Is your wife looking forward to the move? And he said to me, I haven't told her yet. You're the first one I'm telling. So, as I predicted to him, within a week, both of them were in my office contemplating divorce. And that's not the way to go about buying a new house. And in fact, our sages give us very clear, practical guidance on how to make decisions about what to share and how to make sure that we're living up to this. The concept of shalom bayis, of harmony within the home, which is the standard that Jewish couples should try to reach for. So the Talmud gives very clear practical advice on how to achieve that. Now, the Talmud is, in this passage, addressing men, so it is the wording of husbands towards wives, but the same applies of wives towards husbands. But the words of the Talmud are, Ohev is ishto kugufo, you should, to a husband, you should love your wife the same way you love yourself, umachabda yoser migufo, and you should show greater honor to her than you show to yourself. And then the same thing for a wife, to love your husband like yourself and to show greater honor to him than you show to yourself. What does it mean to show greater honor to someone than you show to yourself? Well, it's very, very practical. It means as follows. What decision would you want to be informed of if your partner were to make it? What decision would you want to have input in before it was made? And if this question is in that category, then that means, by definition, to live up to the standard of shalom bayis, you should be discussing it with your partner before you make that decision. It's a very, very simple calculation. Doesn't mean we always follow it, but it's very simple in how to figure it out. If you would want to be included in the discussion, that means you're obligated to include the other person in the discussion. And the practical application of that is this line in the Tanoim, Al Yavrichu V'Al Yalimu. Don't make any major financial decisions without the input of the other person. Now, of course, all of this begs the question and sets the stage for how could Rivka be so careful about not making a financial decision with two goats that to make sure that they belong to her and not to her husband, but still go on to use those goats for this elaborate deception of her husband. So if she wouldn't even take his goat without permission, how could she fool him into giving the blessing to the younger son rather than the older son? So that is a great question that we're still going to leave for another time. But the lesson for today is clear and is very relevant. Don't take your partner's goats or buy a house without discussing it first. My friends, I wish you a great day, and I look forward to seeing all of you soon in person.